Hi, my name is Keith Barnes. I am the owner and director of Tropical Birding, which is a worldwide birding and photography tour company. We are running over 100 tours a year to over 70 destinations. Tanzania is my absolute favorite destination to lead tours in and to guide in and to spend time in. And I'm going to try and tell you a little bit more why in the course of this quick slideshow. All right, so we've only got 10 minutes. If I do not get round to describing all the different birds to you, please just look on the slides. There are captions there. So what is it about Tanzania that makes it so special? Well, let's just quickly look at the numbers. With 1,116 birds, that's the third highest bird total anywhere in Africa. It's a phenomenal number of species. But it's not just the diversity that's in Tanzania that's impressive, it's also the number of endemic birds, with 30 geographical endemics, but more importantly, 52 EBA birds. EBA birds are birds that may be shared partially with Malawi, partially with other countries. That's 52 restricted range birds, birds with very small global ranges, for which Tanzania is one of the major countries in the world to attempt to see them. Nearly 60 species of raptor. For those raptophiles amongst you, it's just wow, just phenomenal daily. And it's not just the diversity, but it's more the fact that you're seeing big numbers of birds of prey just about every day. Mammals, well, of course, it's known for its megafauna, but it's more than that. It's number 4 in Africa in terms of the diversity of mammals it has, and it has over 42 endemic species of mammal. I mean, this country is just wall-to-wall biodiversity. If we go down to the map on the bottom right, you'll see that the country is sort of starkly divided in its protected areas. It's got 33 protected areas, 80 IBAs, 6 biome-restricted assemblages, and 6 endemic bird areas. So in terms of the south, the Southern Arc Mountains, it's not like Namibia where you could go there and maybe spend 3 weeks and see almost everything that's there. Tanzania needs a good 6 to 8 weeks in order to be able to see the vast majority of the birds that are there. That's partially because of access and then partially because of its incredible diversity. The most tricky and difficult area to access is what we call the Southern Arc. This is a range of mountains which are incredibly ancient, and they hold the vast majority of Tanzania's endemic birds, actually. In order to get into these places, you have to do 3 tough mountain hikes in the Udzungwa range, in the Ulugurus, and again in the Akagurus. And each of these places hold their own endemic birds. You're camping, and by camping, I don't really mean sleeping in a luxury tent, but rather typical A-frame tents, eating bully beef and beans. It's pretty tough going, but it's also really fun and challenging. There's some of the least known birds in Africa are seen in these amazing mountains. It is just gobsmacking in terms of the beauty and the scenery that you're getting to see. You can walk for days in this kind of habitat without seeing anybody except for your campmates. It truly is phenomenal. The top right, we have a few of the sort of grassland type species, blue swallows, which will be familiar to folks from the south, but you're primarily focusing on these pockets of forest, these ancient things which may actually even be connected to Gondwana land and some of the Asian forest patches. That's how old they are. And in these places, you're dealing with some of the most restricted range and least seen birds anywhere in Africa and indeed on the planet. So things like Aringa akalat, look, it's not exactly a looker, but it is an incredibly scarce and enigmatic bird. Dapplethroat, it's in its own family with spot throat, and another species of Illidopsis. But these are sort of deep node, ancient lineage things that are living in these crucially old, ancient mountains. And so, yeah, with 14 restricted range endemic species to these mountains, if you really have serious designs on seeing most of what Tanzania has to offer, you're going to have to get in there at some stage. Of course, this may not be for everybody and isn't for most. And so the vast majority of people that do go to Tanzania skip this area. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to skip the south entirely. Mikumi and Selous are 2 great reserves with plenty of excellent infrastructure, including fantastic lodges and good safari type companies that can take you in there. The Miombo is a very interesting type of vegetation. It's this broadleaf woodland. And as we go further north in the Miombo, it tends to get richer and richer in terms of the species, and particularly the Miombo specialty birds that it has. So while you may well be familiar with some of the species on the left there, What you probably won't be familiar with are things like red and blue sunbird, red-capped crombeck, Steeling's woodpecker, pale-bill hornbill. All these birds come into their own further north and add a whole suite of really, really fun, cool, interesting lifers for many people. Kilombero, I don't have any pictures from Kilombero, but it's an interesting swamp system that was discovered in the 80s. Turns out there are 3 species of bird endemic to the Kilombero area, 2 cisticolas and a weaver. It still is one of the least known parts of the country and indeed the world, and well worth really rewarding spending time in these sorts of places. Of course, most people tend to just go to northern Tanzania and enjoy themselves on the well-heeled, beautiful northern safari circuit. I love this place to guide, and the reason is because I can absolutely do no evil as a guide. I can never be wrong. It's amazing how I can keep almost anybody with any variety of interests happy, whether you are a rabbit twitcher, a mild-mannered naturalist, a photographer, a child. And that's because wherever you go, you're in stunning, wild wilderness areas with fantastic accommodation where you get looked after exceptionally well. The trip is active, so it's busy and we're seeing stuff all the time, but it's also quite relaxing because there's not a lot of physical activity. And that's easy because wherever you look, there's spectacles. So this is not to say that you're not enjoying as many different species and things that you can, but there's the backdrop of these spectacles. But whether there's 100,000 wildebeest in the background or 50,000 flamingos, there's a whole bunch of things happening in the foreground in front of you, and it's just non-stop action no matter where you go. So Pemba, this is a small island which is separated from the Tanzanian coastline by a very, very deep water trench. And what that means is that Pemba has developed a suite of 4 endemic birds plus a whole bunch of other weird endemic things. And once you've wrapped up all these amazing creatures, you sit down on a pearly white beach, sap up a martini or a gin and tonic, and if that's not your style, you can also go wading in the water, have a swim, or go snorkeling on some of the best snorkeling reefs in East Africa right off the beaches there. So really an amazing, cool, easy, bird-filled day. Then you head up into the east and the West Usambaras. You normally spend about 4 days in this zone. This will get you quite a few of the birds that are in those mountains down south, but it'll also reveal a whole bunch of new ones that are specific and special. This area is full of tea plantations and has been quite heavily deforested, so it's not quite as wild and beautiful as the far southern mountains, but nevertheless it has a bunch of really, really cool birds and mammals, including the critically endangered long-billed tailorbird, African tailorbird, and then the spot throat, which is related to double throat in that unique family of birds that are restricted to the African ancient mountains. Then all of a sudden you head just 70 kilometers away and you're in a habitat that is completely and utterly different in almost every way, and it is just pumping with birds like most dry woodlands like this. Then we head off to Arusha and the northern capital of Tanzania. As we can see in the photo on the top left, the giant great mountains, Kilimanjaro and Mount Meru, which Arusha National Park is on, which is a great place to visit. It's full of mammals, but it's also full of great birds, such as the bar-tailed trogon that you can see on your far right. And then a little bit to the north, which we call the Lark Plains around there. And it's just thronging with other different dry country birds to what Mkomazi's got. And its own special bird, Beasley's lark, down in the bottom right, which has maybe a population of around 250 individuals and is restricted to a tiny patch of little desert grassland. As you can see, as we head onto the classic safari circuit, it's not exactly roughing it, is it? Right. Then we head to the first of our main national parks, Tarangire and Manyara. Tarangire is well known for harboring a few of the special Tanzanian endemic northern birds. But Tarangire is just this wonderful baobab-clad, almost parkland-like thorn trees and moist savanna. It's also just got an absolute ton of elephants. But as you can see, a whole slew of more interesting, great new birds to be seen here. Ngorongoro Crater really doesn't need any introduction. The picture at the top center is what you get to see when you drive up to the edge of the rim. You peer over the edge and just notice this plain dotted with animals as far as the eye can see, and the densities, and it's really is very, very overwhelming. One of the main things we look for there, if you look at the right, are the stunning golden-winged and takazi sunbirds around the crater rim edge. And when you drop down into the crater, you're seeing things like superb starlings, great crowned cranes, and of course rufous-tailed weaver on the left there. Moving on from Ngorongoro, we head through Olduvai or Olduvai, and finally get to a place which I would say is my favorite place on my favorite tour to be. In Ndutu, we tend to visit between February and April. This is when the wildebeest have come south. The females are all calving, and all of a sudden you've got this just thronging plains with baby wildebeest running around everywhere. The predators trying to get to the wildebeest. There's just tons of really cool birds in this area as well. The other nice thing about it is that the Ndutu area only has a few camps, and so you are absolutely guaranteed not to be bumping into people left, right, and center all the time. The other famous residents of Ndutu are, of course, the cheetahs. Everybody loves spending a little bit of time with these phenomenal cats. That's the great thing about Tanzania, is when you're looking for mammals, you're finding birds. When you're looking for birds, you're finding mammals. When you're looking for those, you've got a backdrop of spectacles. That's just the way the place is. And then last but not least, everybody will have heard of the Serengeti. When I tend to like to run our trips, the wildebeest have moved away from the Serengeti and they are in the Ndutu area. But even for our trips, it's well worth visiting the Serengeti because of the phenomenal and incredible bird life. That's kind of what it's all about. It's finding all these rare, exclusive, localized birds while you're busy watching things like vultures on a kill. So that's pretty much the talk. I would just like to acknowledge Ken Behrens and my other tropical birding colleagues for some of the great photos they let me use for this presentation. I just also like to say that your average trip to Tanzania should net you between 550 and 600 bird species and probably 60 mammal species, probably somewhere between 14 and 17 days. But the thing about this place that never gets dull are the daily spectacles and the unforgettable memories. Come and check out more at the Tropical Birding and Virtual Stand if you'd like to hear more about what we do and who we are. Thanks very much for listening, and have a great fair.